Cove. I'm back live. It feels like it's been a while. I was traveling and adjusting to being back home from traveling and just shifting things. So I feel like it's been a while since I've been here. Um, if you're watching the replay, I kind of start with just visiting for a bit, kind of catching up, wanting to connect. And then I use these lives for my podcast. So I will kind of do a pause and shift and introduce it as a podcast and launch into the teaching, which today is going to be talking about thinning, which is kind of like pruning and just lessons the Lord has taught me out in the garden, um, which not in the garden anymore. I harvested all of my stuff 2 nights ago because it snowed during the day, and then it looked like it was going to clear off and freeze pretty good overnight. So it's like they might be okay with the snow on them. But then as I was up harvesting, I was like, oh, I'm glad I came and harvested because the snow was starting to, it had warmed up a little bit. So the snow was starting to melt and then that's going to drop and freeze. So then the snow wouldn't actually be insulating from the cold. It would actually be driving the cold deeper. So my garden is done for this year, except for I have the basket and bag of vegetables still sitting, waiting for me to process it for storage for the winter. But the garden is done um, for this year because we had snow and cold, and it could be here to stay or it might not be. We'll see. It's been a super rainy. Started in August, I think was the rainiest August we've ever had, and then it has just continued to be rainy. So kind of different there. And we traveled down to Idaho and got to see Tegan got to meet some of her cousins for the first time and got to meet some really good family friends for the first time. Got to experience hot springs and all kinds of farm animals and other animal. We went to a kind of a petting zoo, animal sanctuary type place. I don't know. They had kangaroos and zebras and um, Zorse, which is a zebra horse cross, and Zadonk, I think they called it. I thought it would be a zonkey, but it's a donkey zebra cross. And they had camels and monkeys and all kinds of things. So it was fun to take her and have some time to do those adventures with her. And then came home. It's like, okay, back into the rhythm of like school and daily routines. And it's winter outside and we need to take care of the garden and all that kind of stuff. So let me know where you're watching from and what the season is for you. Like, I know some of you are in places where it's like, oh, it was cool today. It was 80 degrees. And I just laugh. Like 80 degrees is a hot summer day here in Alaska. We're all melting when it hits 80 degrees in Alaska. And I don't know if we broke 40 the last couple of days. I don't pay that much attention. But it's just been a rougher transition than I expected, but it's all good. God teaches us things in all of it. And before I do the launch into the topic today, I wanted to share about this dealing with disappointment workshop that I did, helping to see like why are we disappointed and what does that feel like. And so I'm not sure how well that shows up, but as I teach the workshop, I do a fresh doodle. Like I've doodled about disappointment before, but I don't come with this is what I'm going to do. I am doodling as I'm teaching and as like whatever I'm feeling. Like this is unfiltered, I guess. So this was this was the second one because I started the workshop with a doodle on just kind of who you are. Something that's hopefully not intimidating. So this is the first doodle of the workshop. You can see that the disappointment felt like really big and heavy over me, and I'm like disappointed and down, and there's broken things around me, like broken dreams or whatever. And like, it's just, yeah, it's how disappointment feels. Heavy and disappointed. I was looking to see if I had my sketchbook to see any of the words I'd written in there, but I don't. And then there's messages in our disappointment. And one of the messages in my disappointment, which isn't true, but it was a message that I needed to explore further, was that I'm pathetic. So this was the next doodle that I did. And the pathetic, like just kind of this blob. And again, the dark cloud and everything's just, bleh. And then taking the message out of that, like, that's not true. I'm not pathetic. The Lord has made me and created me for special things, and I am worthy. So that was the final doodle of, no, I am worthy. I do have something to offer. So I just wanted to show you those and give you a little bit more of idea of like, what are these workshops like? And so I am doodling right along with you. I strongly encourage you to have your supplies, which is paper of any kind, a permanent marker, and watercolor paint. And then I just walk you through, this is what I'm drawing. This is why I'm drawing it. I'm writing about what I feel, what I think, and what's the message for each one of those doodles. And like I said, doing that live with you. So you're seeing my process as I am processing. I will do, I'll try it. No, I'll post in the comments the link to that workshop. I have 2 free workshops. There's the Emotions Don't Drive, or Emotions Shouldn't Drive, but they get a seat in the car, is one workshop. And then Processing an Emotion is the second workshop. Those are both currently free. So I'll put the links for those. And then this Dealing with Disappointment workshop is $19. You can, and now it's recorded. So you can watch me. If you need more time to draw or process, you can pause it. If you sign up for the workshop and you have questions, you can always message me or email me. I just wanted to give you a better idea of like, what is this really? And if you have more questions, please ask, because like, it's all clear in my head. So I'm not always sure that I'm explaining it so that it's clear in your head. Let's see, I'm going to grab another sip of coffee and then we'll launch into thinning. All right, so welcome to this episode of the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up podcast. Today, I'm talking about thinning, and you might kind of wonder, like, what does that even mean? But the Lord was talking to me about this while I was working in the garden. I have a friend that gardens for her living and sells vegetables and flowers and all that. And since I do not have much of a green thumb, what I do have, I've learned from her. I go and I weed and do other things for her. The last few years are primarily weed, and that's fine with me. But I go and weed for her in exchange for vegetables and starts and stuff like that. So thinning carrots is one of the main jobs that I do there, because people don't like to thin carrots. You thin. So what happens if you're not a gardener? And she gardens in beds. So she makes a bed that's 2.5 or 3 feet wide. I don't remember now for sure. I think they're 3 feet wide. And so in that bed that's 3 feet wide, and in her garden, like they're 70 feet long or 120 feet long, there are usually 5, sometimes 6 rows of carrots in that 3-foot bed. And she sews them with this neat little contraption that has a wheel, and she rolls it down the straight line and it drops the seeds in all along. And I don't know if it's true everywhere, but up here, carrots are notorious for not germinating well. So just because the seed goes in the ground, it has to germinate and the plant actually grow out of it. And they don't always do that really well up here. So you plant more seeds than you need to make sure that you get the crop that you need to make sure enough plants come up. So they hit a point at, I don't know, probably 2 weeks after they've come out of the ground where they need to be thinned, because if they're in there too thickly, then they grow all twisted and they're going to be stunted because they're fighting for nourishment and they're fighting for space. And so they're only an inch tall. If you get them when you ideally, they're like only an inch or two tall. And when they first come up, they can look a lot like baby grass, which you don't want grass in the garden either. But you don't want to be pulling out carrots thinking they're grass, because obviously this is a carrot bed. You want the carrots to grow here. So anyway, it's tedious work that most people don't like, and I actually really enjoy it. And this because of the size of her operation, and she's doing everything organic. So there's no herbicides and weed killers and stuff like that. Everything is hand weeded. And so not everything you don't get to it all when it's ideal in its state. And so sometimes by the time you get to it, the weeds are already 6 to 8 inches tall. And like just this green carpet that's 6 to 8 inches tall over the whole bed. And their carrots in there are 3 to 4 inches tall or shorter. And so you have to sort through that. And so it's easy to look at the part of the bed that is just completely overrun with the weeds. And so as I was going through doing this one day the beginning of the season, my friend had said something to me about, one of her workers. She had mentioned that there was carrots that needed to be thinned, but that I was coming, and the worker was like, yeah, I'll leave that to her. I don't really know how to do that. And so being the teacher that I am, I'm out there weeding thinking, well, how would I teach somebody how to weed the carrots? And so as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking, well, first of all, it's a carrot bed, so you're looking for the carrots. And then that there's 5 rows of carrots across the bed. So you find where the row is, and then that the spaces between the rows, everything in between there can go. Because even if there is a carrot out in that space, it doesn't belong there. So that automatically reduces your work, because it's very clear that here's a row of carrots and here's a row of carrots, and everything in the 3 inches in between gets pulled out and goes. And then once you've found your carrots, then depending on the variety, they're either going to be thinned to 1 inch or 2 inches apart. So once I find a carrot, then everything in the next inch or the next 2 inches, depending on the variety, goes. And it doesn't matter if it's a weed, and it doesn't matter if it's a carrot, because it has to have enough space for it to grow and mature into what it's supposed to be. And so, thinking through this, and you might at this point be like, I didn't really need a gardening lesson. That's not why I'm here. But the Lord was showing me that in our life, that when we're trying to figure out what we're supposed to focus on and how to make it all fit, that often our approach is, how do I make it all fit? Well, then our life looks like the bed that's overrun with weeds, because we're trying to make like it all fits. It's all in there, but it's not what it's supposed to be. It's not going to produce the harvest that we want it to produce if we leave it that way. So the thinning in our own life, if we apply those same things, like I said with the bed, we start off with, this is supposed to be a carrot bed, and there's supposed to be 5 rows of carrots in here. So when we're looking at our life, instead of going, I want to make it all fit, let's sit with the Lord, and what is this season supposed to be about? What is supposed to fit in this season? So we have a carrot bed. We know it's supposed to have storage carrots that need 2 inches of space to grow into what they're supposed to. And we know they're 5 rows across. For our season in life, what is God saying is supposed to be in this season? What is it supposed to be about? Are we supposed to be volunteering for all the things we're volunteering for? Are we supposed to be doing all the different things in our business that we're doing? Are we supposed to be making time for all the relationships that we're making time for? Or the hobbies or whatever, like sitting with the Lord and like, what belongs in this season? What's the harvest I want to produce out of this season? And we're kind of, like in life, the seasons kind of flow loosely. And like, in one sense, I am in the season of motherhood. I have a 5-year-old at home. And the harvest I want to produce out of that season of her next 13 years or so at home is a well-adjusted young adult who is emotionally where they're supposed to be at and spiritually where they're supposed to be at. We have all these physical developmental skills that we can check on kids to see if they're falling behind, and academic things and stuff to see if they're where they're supposed to be. And there's emotional markers too. So that's the harvest I want, is for her to be where she's supposed to be emotionally, spiritually, and every other way when she gets there, and has the tools to continue to mature and continue to excuse me, to continue to mature and continue towards that calling and design that God has put on her life. Like, that's one season of life that I'm in. I have a business, and looking at my business, what belongs in my business in this season? Is it being on multiple social media networks? Is it producing a bunch of content? Is it one-on-one coaching? Is it group coaching? And sitting with that and being like, all those things are good things, but they may not all fit in this season. And so to go sit back and go, what's the harvest that I want? And how much energy do I have to put into that harvest? Excuse me, while I'm also focusing on the harvest that I want in my daughter and my other relationships. And so going through and pulling out the weeds is relatively easy. Like, sometimes in life it's harder because, like, oh, well, somebody's going to be upset if I do that, or they're going to be disappointed, or who's going to show up for this if I don't make sure it's God that's saying it belongs in your bed in this season, not other people, and not your own people pleasing or striving. Excuse me, I gotta catch my throat. So make sure that what is in your bed is what God is saying to have in your bed in this season. And so if there's things like, that's a huge drain, like if there's things that are obviously weeds to you, they're obviously easier to get rid of. The challenging part of thinning comes when now I'm down to just carrots. And why would I pull out a perfectly healthy carrot? I'm trying to grow carrots. Why would I pull them out? So when you're down to the good things in your life, it's good to be in this Bible study. It's good to be volunteering here. It's good to be having your kids in these activities. It's good to be in all these Facebook groups that have, scripture and encouragement. And so there's all these good things. But just like the carrot bed, if you leave the carrots in there closer than 2 inches when they're supposed to have that much space, they're not going to develop into what they're designed and made to develop into if you're not giving them the space they need. So you have to actually pull carrots out of the carrot bed to get the harvest that you want. And it seems counterintuitive, but that's the thinning that I feel like the Lord is saying is so important in this time, and to rise up to your calling and who you're supposed to be. Is there's not room for the things to develop for the harvest that He has planned for you if you leave everything in. It's too crowded. There won't be enough nutrients. Things won't grow the way they're supposed to. Um, if you haven't gardened, you maybe haven't seen, but it's very normal to see carrots that were super close together, so they grow twisted together, or they split and like they just don't look like they're supposed to because they didn't have room. And so if we want God to produce a harvest in our life, but we're not willing to let go of some of these other things, they can't grow the way he wants them to. They can't produce the fruit that he designed them to if we're not giving them enough space. And then they're not going to have, if there's too many things that we're paying attention to, they're not going to get the resources that they need to grow appropriately either. And that's part of, not having the bed too full is for the be able to get the nutrients that it needs to grow into the healthy harvest that we want. So the thinning part comes down to not only getting rid of the weeds, because that's fairly easy to see, like, yeah, that's not helpful and that's not productive, but to get rid of the good things that are there. And at her garden, where I help and thin, different things are planted in the beds in different seasons. So sometimes in the carrot bed, there might be lettuces coming up. There might be flowers coming up. These different things that are good things. They're things she's trying to grow, but she's not growing them there. So they can't be there because then they're taking away from the harvest that is supposed to be there. So you're going through and you have to pull out that pretty flower. You have to pull out the spinach or the greens or whatever else is growing there, because that's not what that is intended for. And I think to give yourself grace and to give others grace, that they're not in your bed. They don't know what God is saying is your intended harvest for this season, or maybe for your life. So if somebody else comes along and is like, that was a beautiful flower, why would you pull that out? Well, because he's calling me to raise carrots right now. So I can't raise the flowers. Maybe they're called to raise flowers. But giving yourself that grace that nobody else needs to understand what God is calling you to right now. And you don't need to understand what he's calling them to either. Just understand that he is calling them and he does have a harvest for them, just like he does for you. And that might mean they eliminate different things than you would eliminate. But it's important to be listening to the Lord for, first of all, what belongs in this season in my life? What harvest have you planted for? What harvest are you wanting to bring out of this season and out of my life? And when you can get really clear on that, like you'll hear it said, be so clear on your yes that the no is easy. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Be so clear on, this is the harvest. This is my purpose. In Nehemiah 3:10, I think, where the detractors, the enemies are coming and they're trying to get Nehemiah to stop building the wall and come down and talk to us. Like we're not, they were lying, but saying, like, we're not against you. We just we want to discuss this with you. We don't understand. And or Nehemiah to say, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. I feel like the Lord bringing that verse back. I used that a lot when my kids were little, the older ones, because people are like, oh, well, you're a stay-at-home mom, so you can do all this stuff at church and you can do these ministries and you can do that. And I'm like, no, what God has put in my garden bed for this season is these kids, and they're a great work. And so I don't have room in my bed with my capacities, my skills, my personality. I don't have the capacity to put anything else in this bed that God doesn't say to put in here. Just because you see space in it doesn't mean that there's actually space, which would be another gardening thing. Like, yes, these carrots can be 2 inches apart, but if I'm planting broccoli in that same bed, the broccoli plants need 3 feet of space. She plants them staggered every 18 inches. So this side of the bed, then the other side of the bed. So down one side, they are 3 feet apart, and then they're staggered 3 feet apart on the other side of the bed. So when you look at that to begin with, you can be like, look at all that wasted space. Why didn't you put more in there? And for a time, that's what it looks like. And you have to be okay with maybe that's what your life looks like for a while, that people look at it and think it's empty and think that you're not doing enough. But by the end of the season, you can't see the ground in that row. You can't even see the ground between the rows because those plants get so big. But they wouldn't get that big if you didn't give them that space and didn't give them what they needed. So I see children like broccoli plants. Like, there needs to be a lot of open space around them for them to grow into what they're supposed to. And if you have it all filled full because that's what people are telling you, or that's what your insecurities and your wounds of the past are telling you, it's going to impact their growth and it's going to impact your harvest. So just encourage you to sit with the Lord and say, Lord, what are you putting in my garden bed? What are you putting in my season right now? How much room does it need to grow? Show me what the harvest at the end of this is going to be so that I can stay focused on that and make it easy to say no to all the other things that other people want to put in, all the distractions that come, all of that other stuff. I can easily say no because my yes is so clear that I see this is the harvest you have for me of emotionally and spiritually healthy children that are making an impact for the kingdom. Or, maybe you don't, I was going to say maybe you don't have kids, but like, no, I'm talking to kingdom mothers, which I guess is possible. You're in here. Maybe you have spiritual kids and not biological kids. But where you have a ministry or your kids are grown and now you're focused on a business, so clearly see this is the harvest and this is what's coming. So I can say no to everything that's a distraction because I need these things to have the space and the nourishment that they need to produce the harvest that God has called me to. So thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts. If God is calling you to thin things and you're like, yeah, that's really scary. It is. And digging into why that is scary is super helpful. And if you feel like you don't know how to do that, well, the Process and Emotions workshop would be helpful, and that's a free one. You also can reach out to me because some of the things are big and it's really good to go through them with someone instead of diving into big things on your own if you're not used to doing that. Totally lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was saying. Yeah, share with me. What is God saying belongs in this season? What is your focus? What's the harvest he's bringing you to? I would love to be praying over that with you, and I will see you next time.